like whatever you choose, you're going to miss either the energy of the city or the quiet, the peace. I was walking and I saw this very cute dog. So I took a picture of the dog and I got told off by the person that I should have asked to take a picture of just the dog, even if it's just the dog, there's no person, nothing. Do I really belong here? And is this my culture? And maybe it is somewhat boring. And how do I try to put effort to make my life here, or do I just move away somewhere more exciting?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dating Beyond Borders podcast. Today, I'm talking with Elza, who left Ukraine as a teenager, has lived all around the world, and is now based in Switzerland. We'll dive into Swiss mentality, the experience of integrating into Swiss culture, and what it's like living as a permanent foreigner, the dual feeling of wanting to put down roots, but also fearing the commitment to one place. And I'm sure it's a feeling that is familiar to many travelers, expats, and immigrants. So welcome, Elza.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on. I think we have a lot of subjects that to talk about today, and a lot of subjects that I can also relate to really well as someone who's traveled around the world and moved around the world. And I think it's a feeling that people will relate to really well. But let's start.
That's great to hear that I'm not alone.
Yeah, you're definitely not. And I think it's a common feeling in 2024. Just because people used to be rooted to one place because of their job, because there was no need to move abroad. And coming from former Soviet Union, our parents didn't have this ability to even travel abroad. And it's a completely different feeling, right?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. Just the fact that up until a few years ago, it was my mother's first time traveling abroad. So it's a very different lifestyle that we're living right now, which is why it makes it even more so crazy and weird to me that there are so many things that are completely new and that I don't know how to feel about them. And I don't have anybody around me to talk about these things other than friends and people around my age who also experience same things.
Yeah, so let's talk about your story. So you moved away from Ukraine as a teenager. That's not something that I hear a lot from Ukrainians. Typically, they move now because of the situation, or recently, or with their family. So what was your prompt to leave Ukraine in the first place?
My main motivation was to get quality education and to get that social lift. That was the primary reason why we started looking into universities abroad, and we were open to quite many options. But then one of the most important factors for us was financial aid. And then we learned that American universities are very generous when it comes to financial aid. So then we started to, more concentrate on American universities. And eventually I was applying to universities abroad in the US, primarily, with only one university that's outside of the US. But ironically, that's the one that I eventually went to because it gave me the best scholarship and also the best opportunities. Then I went to study at New York University, Abu Dhabi, and I just turned 17 when I went to live there. So many things were super new to me. Just having the first experience living abroad is already something, but also first experience being in the Middle East and surrounded by people coming from 120 countries, all at the same time, living on a small campus, interacting every single day is also, for me, it was like a next level challenge. But I absolutely loved it. And I feel like that experience kind of set the foundation for all my other international experiences.
Yeah, moving away when you're 17, that's something that I wish I did, but I was so terrified when I was 17 to switch it up. I was so scared. That thought has never even crossed my mind. I do regret not doing, a year abroad. A lot of people, when they went to university, a lot of students, they did a year abroad. I never did that. And a part of me has always regretted that. I've traveled a lot, but I think it's so different when you're a teenager versus when you're in your 20s versus when you're in your 30s. And as you know, as a side note, I think people a lot of times they wait to travel They're like, oh, I'll do it when I'm in my 30s. I'll do it when I'll have more money.
Yeah.
But it's a completely different travel experience traveling in your 30s versus your 20s versus your teens. So, how did it feel for you when you were 17 and you went to this new country? Were you petrified? What was that feeling?
It was a lot of excitement. I always wanted to try living abroad. And actually, I have a few cousins who come from a bigger family. So, because of that, they were sort of granted this opportunity to go study and live with a family in Spain and Italy, each in a different one every summer. And I was so jealous of them. I really wanted to have that experience. So, when I finally got the experience of living abroad and it turned out to be university, I was extremely excited, but also I didn't even predict the number of challenges that I would face, apart from the language challenges, which I thought would be the biggest for me. And they were quite substantial. But it was also all the social challenges, cultural ones. So, what our university does is in the first year, it puts you randomly, well, sort of randomly, but actually it does something called max mix. So, it tries to maximize the cultural differences and it puts you living with people from completely different continents. So I lived with someone from Taiwan and someone from South Africa and Lithuania. And it was so crazy to me because some of us are very religious, others were putting, like sex reference posters on the wall. And it was crazy. It was absolutely life shaping. I feel like, yeah, we had quite an experience. Um,
Who was putting up the sex posters? Was it the
oh no, I don't want to reveal that. But I do have this picture because at the time I was very religious, and I was trying to keep the religion. I was reading Bible every single night, and then Easter comes, so I wanted to have this gathering with friends who are also Orthodox Christians. I invite them over. And then I have this picture where we have our Easter bread and we take a picture of ourselves in front of all the wall, being like with all the sex references. It's crazy to me. Yes, but that's how we had to, find common ground and peace living together.
Interesting. So, do you feel like, but you mentioned that it shaped you as like a person. Do you feel like it's made you? I don't even want to say open minded, but I mean, like, did it open you up to, okay, there's a possibility of people being completely different around the world that you never thought about before?
100%. 100%. I think that growing up in Ukraine, which is a very homogenous society, I thought like there is things that are done right and things that are done wrong. And especially like religious part was one of those, one of the really big, not adventures, but, roller coaster rides and exploration points for me, which university and being around so many people helped me to shape, to understand that there's no just one right religion. And also no one right God, like especially looking at Abrahamic religions, it was very interesting to step aside from that. And one specific class that I took in university, which we also had a trip to Bali, and then we went around Hinduistic temples, and to see that their take on religion is completely different. So I feel like that shaped me a lot, and also to realize that when I was in Ukraine, I was a very like um, yeah, people would call me like a nice kid. I was trying to do things correctly. I didn't drink, I didn't party, like things like that. No, no, no. So it's a very wrong thing to do. But then I come to this university, which advertises itself as a global leaders place. And then I see global leaders doing basically the same things from which I ran away. And I was like, oh my God, is it me maybe having this perception and really like defending myself from other lifestyles and have putting like so many of rigid boundaries on what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And then after you finished up in Abu Dhabi, where did you go? Did you come back to Ukraine or did you go somewhere else?
Yeah, so I finished, I came back to Ukraine and then a month after the war started. So I didn't spend too much time there. When I went to Ukraine, I was looking for jobs. But then with the war, we moved away. And then we were looking for a host family to stay with my mom. Um, that was a challenge, but we found a family in Switzerland, which is how I ended up in Switzerland in the first place. But because I was looking for a job and I knew English and I didn't speak any other foreign languages, I thought the better place for me would be London. So I actually decided to go to London, found a job there. I was there for some time. And then eventually I kept thinking about how good were the times when I was in Switzerland for those couple months when I was waiting for my UK visa. Yeah, and then I came back to Switzerland.
It's interesting too, because we're going to talk about Switzerland in just a second, but it's funny how we always kind of see the past in rosy colors. Oh, that was what a great time that was. And you come back, you're like, oh, what a great time London was. And it
For
just
sure,
keeps going, right?
100%. 100%. The grass is always greener is not even doesn't even convey that. It's like, yeah.
It's like when people are in relationships and then they break up with someone and they think, oh, but that partner, but they were good in that one thing, that this partner doesn't have, So I don't know. It's just, I think, human nature in a way to think that way. Okay. So you were in London for some time. For how long were you in London for?
8 months.
8 months. Okay. And then you moved to Switzerland. And how long have you been in Switzerland at this point?
Almost 2 years now.
Okay. So let's talk about Switzerland before we continue our conversation about that fear of commitments. What did you think about Switzerland before moving to Switzerland? Did it live up to your expectations? Yes, no, maybe?
Okay, so to be honest, before we found a host family here, I didn't even think of Switzerland as a place to live or even to visit because it was always like very expensive in my mind. And I was like, no. Yeah, and it's also a place for retired people. Like the nature is stunning, obviously. But apart from that, I didn't ever thought I would be in Switzerland. But then when I was already in London, I had this very rosy perception because thanks to my host family, they really helped me integrate right away, pretty much. I was very much into entrepreneurship, so they opened a spot for me to join an accelerator program. So I was like very integrated into the community. I had things to do right away. And the nature was amazing. Obviously, I was stunned and I'm still stunned every single time that I travel. And then actually compared to London, when I was in Switzerland, it seemed so sunny and like they always have this amazing weather, which turned out to not be that true. But that was a trigger. Yeah, this was the environment, and I never thought of Switzerland before as like a boring place or something like that. Once I already spent some time here, so yeah, I was really, I would say, like from the first couple of months that I spent there, I was really in love with Switzerland.
Did that change at all?
Well, I started experiencing this roller coaster ride of, oh yeah, excitement stage. And then it kind of toned itself down into, do I really belong here? And is this my culture? And maybe it is somewhat boring. And how do I try to put effort to make my life here? Or do I just move away somewhere more exciting? Which moving away is always the answer.
No, I can totally relate to that. And I guess when you say that, was it my culture? Did you feel like London was your culture? Was it closer to kind of connecting with who you are as a person?
Definitely not. I
Mm.
think, if anything, Switzerland is a closer place by culture to me and by lifestyle. Um, London was too wild for me, but it's still like, as I said, like in the beginning, it's all very exciting and nice. And I was in euphoria stage. But then over time, it's just some things that really like, putting some rocks, like first this little thing happens, then another thing happens, maybe interaction with someone, or some things that I have to do for like documents that make me realize like, oh, it's a very bureaucratic country, that eventually kind of pile up. And I'm starting to think like, yeah, is this the place? And I feel like that turning point for me was um, when I switched from a corporate job into self-employment, because at a corporate job, first of all, I wasn't there for far too long, but also, I mean, yeah, the salary was amazing. And then I got to have such a good work-life balance. I was traveling pretty much all the time. I had work friends. We had a community for people 30 under 30. So I felt also integrated. But once I switched into self-employment, that's when all the doubts and questioning, like, do I really want to build my business and my life in this place and around this place?
Yeah.
That's when it came in.
You raised two really great points. The first one is the honeymoon stage, right? The honeymoon phase, whatever they call it. And it's, I talk a lot about relationships. This is something that is very true with relationships is when we started off with someone the first 6 months, we don't see many of the negatives because we're so attracted. And basically we have these rose-colored glasses when we look at our partner. And then eventually we get to the real core of the relationship. Am I compatible with this person? That's not something you really think about truly the first few months because of the sexual attraction and and I think this is also very true when it comes to moving abroad. When people come somewhere as expats, they think, oh, it's so wonderful, I love this. And you see this. I do a lot of interviews with people that live abroad, and you can see a difference with people that have been somewhere for 2-3 months versus someone who's been there for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. There really is a difference in the answers, because of course, how can you really get to know a place within the first few months? You only see the positives of that. The second point is, of course, when you work for yourself, because I work for myself, and I know there's no lonelier job than when you sit and work from home and you're in a new country. And this also means that you have no roots in this country. There's nothing really holding you to this country because you work from home and you're not really integrated into the society. And you can technically do this job from anywhere and you can be
Exactly.
anywhere. And that's a really, people don't talk about how tricky that is when you can make a change when you're constantly aware of the options that you have, then your mind is not at peace because you're constantly trying to convince yourself one way or another, what's holding me here? But maybe I will be happier somewhere else. But then if I move somewhere else, I'm never going to make friends in this country. But then if I'm in this country, I don't know if I want to try to make more friends because I would rather be somewhere else. And your mind is constantly spinning and it can really wear you down. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like the FOMO is so real, and nothing is enough, especially once you have the freedom to be somewhere, as you said, but also once you've been in a couple of places already and you only remember the positives, the highlights, the cherry on top, right? And you don't necessarily, like, when you compare places, you are comparing everything that is both good and bad in the current place with only the positives of what it's like in the other places. So then you always want to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
But it's a trap. It's a trap.
It reminds me of when you have a beautiful vacation romance with someone and you're like, oh, this was so great because I knew them for 1 week. We
Yeah.
never got to the bad parts. Versus the relationship that I have with this person for 3 years. It's kind of that comparison. It's like, oh, I had the best time of my life. But yeah, I think every place has its issues. It's just like, what problems are you willing to put up with? What speaks to your soul in terms of where you want to be? And that can be really hard. As you've mentioned, the more you travel, the more you see, the more the more experiences you have, the harder it is to make that choice. That's why I'm so jealous of the people that are born in their one village and they're I remember going to Ukraine, for example, when I was a kid, and I met people in the village and they're like, Moscow, like that's so far. They were like, this is just for them, it was like, if I was talking about Australia, so they had no concept of, and I had a friend, she was from the Netherlands and she was from a village in the Netherlands. And people used to say, oh my God, I've never been to Amsterdam. And this is crazy for me because it's a tiny country. You live in the country, but you've never been to the capital city. And you just think about it how can you live your life and never even visit the capital city? But maybe these people
Yeah.
are pretty happy where they are. They don't need to see anything else, completely different mindset.
I think it's a different mindset, but also maybe it depends on the stage of life, because then at some point when you don't have enough of resources, when you are excited about the places and when you do want to travel, then over time it's kind of like, well, I'm already set in my ways and I don't want to see anything else. For example, my stepdad, who is in Ukraine, he never even had an international passport. For him, it was not something that he thought of doing with his life to live abroad or even to travel abroad. Like everything's enough for him where he is.
Yeah, I think it comes down to your personality as well. So certain people, just their priorities are completely different. They're totally fine just being in one place. They don't need that experience. And for the rest of us, I want to say us because I'm exactly the same way as you. It's never enough. You're constantly you're constantly torn between a few different places, and you constantly feel like you're in one place and your body's here and your mind is here, and um, commitments can be really scary. But I want to go back to, I want to get back into the Swiss mentality, and I still want to come back to this topic because I think it's a really good one. Let's talk about making friends in Switzerland. What has that experience been like for you when it comes to connecting with Swiss people specifically?
Okay, so if we're talking about Swiss people and not expats, then I think Swiss people. Hmm, yeah, okay. So the Swiss people that I know, they tend to stay in the same places or at least in the same country because Swiss believe that Switzerland is the best place on earth. Education is amazing, work is good, like salaries on top, nature amazing, lifestyle amazing, right? So why would we go somewhere else? And because of that mindset, I feel like they tend to develop friendships and stick to them from very early on, like from kindergarten and middle school, and then they carry those friendships through entire life. That's why when expats come here, Swiss people, like, they don't need necessarily any more friends. Um, and what I know and what I felt was, yeah, if you do end up showing them that one, you're committed to stay in this country and you're not just in a transitory space where you came here to earn money and leave, what that would show them that maybe you're worth considering taking into their lives. Um, but they want that loyalty and they want to know that you're not just here for 2 years. That's part number one. And part number two, I feel like with Swiss people, stereotypically speaking, you need to show some interest, some effort, and be the one initiating things, at least in the beginning. Um, Once again, yeah, to prove that you want that because they don't need any more people in their lives. But if you want to fit in, I think some of them are open, especially younger people are pretty open to hang out. Depends on also like how much of a friends you want to be. If you want to be hanging out with people, then through jobs, through some meetup groups, by hobbies, for example, like I joined board game communities. Then there are some people who like board games. Yeah, we can be hanging out, but would we then like invite each other for dinner or come over to their house? That would be a very separate kind of deal and conversation. Um, but I do have one close Swiss friend, and what's different about her is that one, she's mixed, so she's half Moroccan, and the other thing is that she herself is a lot more explorative and she's very interested in other countries, other places. She's considering living abroad even though she hasn't up until now, so she's just, yeah, a lot more open-minded. So then, yeah, I guess depends on the personality and how much effort you're willing to put. And actually, if you even need Swiss friends, that's something to consider. Then it's possible to get them. But otherwise, expat communities wherever you go.
So, just for anyone that's listening or watching, where do you live in Switzerland?
In Zurich.
Okay, just because people are going to be saying, well, it depends on the German part versus the
Oh
French
yeah,
part,
for sure, it depends. Yeah.
But yeah, and of course I get that. Like, why would you specifically look for local friends if you have other expats? And I think it's easier to become friends with expats because you have that shared experience, right? That you're all kind of looking for yourselves. You're not in your own home country. And actually, what I love about living abroad is that people are more willing to connect because they are alone in this country and they're a lot more lonely and they're eager to make those connections. I really struggle with this when I come back to Canada because whenever I'm abroad, I find it super easy to connect with people because everyone's up for doing things. Not sure if that's the
Mhm.
case in Switzerland. But I still think people are more eager to make those connections. But the other point that I wanted to talk about is that you said like people make friends in kindergarten. That's such a common theme when it comes to, I focus a lot on Scandinavia and even the Netherlands and even, maybe to an extent Germany. But there's really like a theme happening here. And I don't know if it's true, for example, like in Ukraine, do people do that as well? Or are they more open to making friends later on in life? Because I feel like people change so much as like if I still had my friends from when I was 15 years old, like what would we have in common now? I feel like I've changed so much. Like the only way I can see that is that you either don't really change very much or you don't evolve very much during your life. You don't have many extremely new experiences, or that somehow they're incredibly good friends that can grow with you. Because otherwise, I don't know how you can still be friends with people that you knew 30 years ago, 20 years ago.
I think there's just different kinds of friendships, right? Especially um, once you're becoming older, where there's some people that you hang out with, and then there's some people who you share maybe some hobbies with. There's some people who you have great conversations, maybe who you connect really well at this point in your life. But then there are some comfort friends, and I think I have one or two from back home who maybe we are very different right now, and we have very different priorities, vision where to be in life and how to lead life. But just that comfort of having someone who's known you throughout the years and who's seen your development, that is, yeah, very comforting and super nice to come back and spend some time with those friends from time to time. I wouldn't know if we were in the same place if we would hang out like every single day. It's a different kind of friendship. Then I feel like, yeah, we do have to have more of similar values, maybe some things that we want to that are important for us at this stage of our life. But it's comfort friends.
And I definitely agree with you on this. I think you're right. It's that people that have known you since you were younger and you just how you've built that rapport with each other, like you know each other so well, and you may not have the same interests and you can have other friends for that, but you know each other, mm, like you can confide in each other more than you can with
Yeah.
someone that you just have shared interests with. And there are a lot of people that come and go, and especially nowadays people just kind of we don't I feel like people don't want to invest as much into friendships either. Like if you meet someone in your 20s, or especially when you're in your 30s, like I'm in my 30s, it's like you really need to either work together or see each other time and time again to build that kind of friendship. If you just go and meet each other, let's say through Facebook group, and you go for coffee, like what is there in common that you guys have that you're going to keep seeing each other and over and over and over again? It's so easy to just say, okay, ciao, like I'm
Yeah.
off. I've started noticing this with people, and I don't know if it's me or if it's other people, but speaking of, making friends, actually, I have some statistics from Internations, and in 2020, Switzerland ranks 53rd out of 58 for ease of making friends. So this is interesting, and I think you've explained the reason why, um, and it makes sense. I think it makes sense, um, but how would you describe the Swiss German mentality if you could narrow it down in a few sentences? No pressure.
Yeah. I think Swiss German mentality. Well, generally speaking, I think stereotypes are true. Swiss Germans are very rules oriented, very proper, following traditional path in life. Yeah, keeping close connections with those who are around them. They want their privacy, and yeah, they're. I would say like I just have this image of someone who's like very traditional and correct. This
Is
is
it?
how things are supposed to be done.
Have you ever gotten any complaints about, let's say, like I know there's this thing where if you play music too loud on Sundays, if you vacuum too loud, if you do anything that uh that gets your neighbors kind of annoyed, they will come and they will knock on your door, they will call the police. Has that ever happened to you?
It happened on multiple occasions, not exactly same scenarios, but one, for example, we get from the building a notification. do not put your shoes in front of the door if there is fire hazard, and they send them specifically to the people who put shoes in front of their doors. So it's not just a universal announcement to the building. I don't know how they track that. There are no cameras inside the building, so they really have to be going and like checking things, because we actually asked the neighbors on our floor if they all also got it. No, they didn't. And the other time, which was quite recent, I was walking and I saw this very cute dog on the street, and I was walking from afar. So I took a picture of the dog, and I got told off by the person that I should have asked to take a picture before taking the picture of just the dog. Even if it's just the dog, there's no person, nothing. Yeah, I should have asked for the consent. So that's how things are here. Yeah, I would totally ask if there was person in the frame. If it's just a white dog, I wouldn't necessarily consider doing that.
Yeah, the privacy laws, it's not just Switzerland. I know, for example, in Austria, we were doing some interviews there, and I said, well, just do some B-roll, which is like shots of the city, of people. And the videographer said, yeah, well, we are not allowed to do that because they can say that this was illegal. Like, we cannot
Yeah.
get their face on camera. And also in Denmark, this is something that I've heard about, like, if you're, let's say, doing speaking gig in front of people. I was interviewing a speaker, and she said, I cannot take a photo of the audience because this is against privacy laws. And I thought, how are you supposed to be able to do very simple, like, this is something I would never even think about, but you take it even like further. I mean, in terms of just taking a photo of a pet, I think this is something else. This I have never heard of. That's quite crazy, actually.
Well, I feel like Swiss people, it's a very interesting and fine line. They would not want to get into conflicts. So they would just maybe like have the Swiss stare, what they call it, like just look at you judgmentally. But if you are doing something wrong and it's actively affecting them, I think they would just go and tell you. But yeah, and I remember when I was living in the UAE, I took film classes. So then there you have to ask for permission if you're filming outside on the street, in the cafes, everywhere. If it's not just the phone. Phone somehow is okay, but camera, not okay.
So what has been your biggest challenge about settling down in Switzerland? Is it that, these privacy laws? Is it that it's kind of boring? Is it like, what is it about the country that you've had the biggest difficulty with adjusting to?
Oh, I think it was depending on the stage. In the beginning, it was like, yeah, finding friends was a difficulty, and it kind of persisted for a long time. I feel like just now I'm starting to realize, oh, I have people that I'm constantly in touch with, and it's actually very gratifying to see that progress, because it felt like it would never come. So social life was one. Then at some point I realized language, if I want to be here long term. Yes, in Zurich, like everything is in English. But if you want to be here long term, people do speak to you first in Swiss German. Documents, banks, well, depends on the banks you have, but mine is, for example, only like German, French, or Italian. Yeah, documentation is huge. And it all comes in German, the websites. So over time, if you want to be here, language is really important. And especially depending on the type of employment you have, for some fields, it's really important to have the local language. Even though, like, initially I came here, my job did not need German. Then once my contract ended and I was looking whether to get a new job or switch to self-employment, I saw that most of the positions required German. So it was just luck in the first time. And then the final challenge, which I'm dealing with right now, and which drives me a little bit nuts, is bureaucracy and control over everything. The need to report every step of my life. And I feel like also Switzerland being confederation, rules change from canton to canton, procedures change. So you really need to stay on top of that. And it's wild to me coming from Ukraine, where we don't report much to the government. Having this much information that I have to give about myself. So, to give you an example, actually, something that I'm dealing with as we speak is I want to move together with my boyfriend, move in. And I received, so I applied, sent official letter, right, by post, which is something else that for me is like, oh my God, I have to send everything by post. So I applied for that, and then they sent us a response saying that they need additional information to approve this, where they ask, when did I meet my boyfriend, under which conditions, when did we get into a relationship, how do we see our future together, how do we spend our time together. There's a set of 6 questions that I have to answer, and then they also ask for my answers and for his answers separately. It's not something that has to be done for everyone, but I think it's because of the status that I'm here on. They keep an extra control. But generally speaking, like, it's also the case that things are in control here. Like, the other example was I would go to a local Gemeinde, so to the local municipality office, and I was dealing something with there, and they asked me, person who I wasn't even talking to. I was just walking out of the room, and she was walking out of the other room, and she asks me, do you live in your apartment still? Because we received information that you no longer live there, that you no longer spend most of your time there. And that we received information is something that is, again, like, so wild for me to know that I'm actively being watched and controlled. Um, yeah, I did not yet make my peace with this.
Yeah, that sounds like 1984, the book. Like the Big Brother watching.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I know it's not, it's obviously not Stalin times, but but also at the same time, I can imagine that it could be so unnerving because you know that someone's giving information on you, and it could be your neighbors, and they're smiling to your face, but behind your back, they're giving all this information. So then you think like, who's doing all of this, and who can I
Who's the
trust?
snake?
Who's the snake? Exactly. Who's the weasel here? And yeah, this is something that is it's interesting to me to listen to that because I've heard of something more or less similar when it comes to Germany, when it comes to obviously the documentation. Like we live in 2024, and yet everything is done via post and papers and mail, and I think that's crazy, especially because of Switzerland, like being one of the most well, at the top, the most developed country in the world, I would say, or one of the most, obviously not the most, but just the quality of life is impeccable. Everything runs on
Yeah.
time, but yet at the same time, you have post in the mail. Who does this, And and it's crazy for me. Like I understand that. I think it's a status thing, right? Because you still don't have the EU citizenship and your boyfriend does. He's Spanish for anyone that doesn't know. But he has the EU citizenship. He probably has some sort of papers to live in Switzerland, right? So they assume that you're trying to get status, so they're trying to see that this is an actual relationship. Is that their goal, or I'm not understanding?
I'm not sure what is the exact reasoning for this. I know that it's because I'm changing cantons. That is primary reason why they're asking for so many questions. But why about the relationship specifically? I don't know, because we didn't even apply for that change. I mentioned in my application that I would be moving in with my boyfriend, but I applied for the change based on my work situation and based on moving to a private apartment. So I'm not sure why they're so interested in my personal life.
But my question is, so if you make any sort of decisions in life in Switzerland, if your life changes, if you move apartments, if you move in with your boyfriend, if you like, do they kind of keep track of everything then? Because it seems like it feels very strange to me that if I'm going to move apartments, I have to somehow write a whole letter explaining why to the government, to the.
No, so I think it depends, really depends on the status you have here. The B status, which most of the expat workers here have, they can easily move apartments. And I think if I just moved apartment within the same canton, it wouldn't be the problem. But because of the protection status that I have here, where they also try to keep the more or less, mm, I don't know, equal number of Ukrainians per canton. They are very strict with this. So they ask for additional questions.
Now, talking about the nightlife culture, it seems to me that you're not exactly like the most nightlife type of person, which I can totally relate to. I'm a bit
No.
of a hermit lately as well. But when it comes to, let's say, even eating out, I've heard that in Switzerland, because it's so expensive, there's not really this culture of going out and eating out. And, I was just like in Spain and in Croatia, and you see people, this is a big part of the culture, just sitting outside, talking, eating. How does that play out in Switzerland? Have you noticed this, that people don't really do the nightlife a lot, or they don't go out to eat a lot?
Well, the first part is I think that people who come here to work, they're generally speaking, like I'm obviously generalizing, but they're of a specific kind of personality. So there may be more nature oriented, maybe slightly more introverted. Sometimes they like more wholesome things. So then there is not that much of a need. But actually, yeah, in the news, I was reading recently that some of the clubs here in Zurich complain that now there's a lot less demand. But I think it's more generational rather than like Zurich specific or Switzerland specific. I think that people who want to go out, they still go out. There's like a few places, it's a very small hangout spot, but there is something for those who feel the need. The other day, I was asked if I go out, and I said, sometimes I like to do karaoke. And I was laughed at because apparently karaoke doesn't count as going out. I don't know. For me, it is going out. I've never been to a club here. So, like karaoke, which happens at 10 p.m., and which, like, there's people dancing and drinking. So, I thought that is going out. Maybe I'm not the best person to speak about this. But yes, there's places. Talking about your second point of eating out, I think there's a lot less of this culture as opposed to London, where I was just before. But I think it's also depending on the reason. One is, yeah, it is more expensive, definitely 100%. It's so expensive that people prefer to sometimes maybe host dinners at home, invite people over, or do something else. And the other part is that I feel like also, for example, speaking comparatively to London, it's a lot more of face-to-face interactions in London as opposed to here, where people do things together, like they do sports together, bouldering, hiking, skiing, or they do board games, or let's go mug painting. Things like this are a lot more popular than when I was in London.
Yeah, I've picked up on this in Austria and in Germany to an extent, like that there's this like walking culture. People like to hike, people like to do things side by side. Maybe it's a little bit of that fear of interaction that comes into play, because I feel like, like I just had a girl, actually, Ukrainian girl, we did a podcast, and she lives in the Netherlands, and she said, really surprised me. People do a lot of board games here, and that's not something I've ever seen in Ukraine. And I thought the same, because when I was in the Netherlands, I was dating a Dutch guy, and I remember we did a lot of board games. And I thought, like, I can't imagine like Eastern Europeans drinking and doing board games. That's not something we do very often, not in the culture so much, but Dutch love
Okay,
it.
maybe not necessarily board games, but I think we do social games like Mafia or
That's true.
Werewolf, which people know
That's
more,
true.
or what else? Charades.
That's
I
true.
think we do something, but just slightly more different. Yeah, here it's more like let's lay out this ginormous board with like a million different ways to play the game. And I remember sometimes that I was going for these events, a woman would come and she like put this box with a board game, and she's like, I played this game 17 times and nobody could beat me. I really want a challenge. And I was like, very different type of person, not me, not me.
That's
Yeah.
so funny. But speaking of, hiking and nature activities, I was thinking a lot about this, because I wonder like how that influences your life. Because, living in Toronto, it's not the most exciting city. Like, even if you want to go and do something, some hiking, where do you go? There's not so many places in the city. But I can imagine living in Switzerland. That's such a huge benefit to your life, that you can just get away
Yeah.
from the city. The city, I mean, it's still so rural in a way, right? Like, Switzerland is so beautiful. I wonder, because a lot of people say you can't run away from yourself, or even if it's beautiful, it doesn't matter, because if you're not enjoying your stay in the country, no amount of beauty is going to make you feel better. So I have a question for you. This is on a personal level, like I'm genuinely curious about this. When you're having one of those not so positive days, but you walk around Zurich or you get outside in the nature, do you feel like there is a benefit that the beauty of the country has on your like mental state?
100%.
Mm.
I think I really enjoy getting out here and just having this, absolutely breathtaking nature, an hour away, 2 hours away by train, and actually making active use of that is definitely bringing a very positive wholesomeness in my life. I think I am not always using those opportunities. Like sometimes I'm more work focused, so then I don't get out. But then, like for example, yesterday I went for a hike, and it's like, oh my god, yes, that's why I want to be here in this country. And yeah, I think I really enjoy this, and it feels a lot more active and wholesome, and like we're actually doing something when I'm socializing with people, other than drinking. That is a very positive side of Switzerland.
Yeah, that's something I've been thinking a lot about lately. And I just think like your environment can really change the way you feel. And it's because let's say London, because of the weather, because of the fact that it's a bigger city, whenever you have a day off, what are you going to do, right? Like it's raining outside, there's no nature inside. You really have to get out of the city to see some nature. And it's not going to be the nature that you're going to see in Switzerland, right? So that kind of affects the way you spend your weekends, and that affects your mood, and that affects the way you feel in a place. And so people sit around pubs and they drink a lot. And that's something that I think about a lot because for me, whenever I have a weekend, I want to go out and I want to do things. But when it's winter time in Canada, there's not really much you can do except go to an expensive restaurant, spend some
Yeah.
money, drink. Um, and I think that can really affect the way you feel as well, and like your happiness levels. Um, at the same time, however, like you had mentioned that your boyfriend, I mean, he loves Switzerland and he wants to settle down in Switzerland and he wants to move to like kind of a rural area in Switzerland. And how does that make you feel? I sound like a therapist. I'm so sorry.
No
Therapist
worries.
says.
Yeah, I actually didn't make my mind on this matter yet. I definitely know that in the next 5, 6, 7 years, I do not want to live somewhere rural. Like already living in Zurich, I sometimes feel like it's too quiet for me. So moving somewhere in the middle of nowhere will not work because he's a lot more introverted. And for him, a lot of his hobbies and things he does are like centered in the house, in the apartment. So he doesn't need to go out, see people. But I know that I do definitely need social life, and it makes up for a great deal of my mental, emotional health and well-being. So I we're in the talks. He is very hopeful that it's something that will pass for me with age. I think it's more of a personality than an age thing. So we will see. But yeah, I to be honest, I don't have a solution for this yet. Where I'm in a very like existential crisis point in my life. I think I'm coming out of it now. It's like some things become more clear. But for the time that we've been dating, it's exactly when I was switching jobs, becoming self-employed, or first like not even knowing what to do, then becoming self-employed, trying to settle here, find friends, all the things to do while he was already here for quite a few years, so he's a lot more set in his ways. So we will see how it turns out, but I know that for me to get to the point of living somewhere rural, I first have to get to the point of committing to one place, and that's a challenge and a personal discovery which I'm having now. Once I'm able to answer the question, where do I want to live? Then I would be able to think further.
Yeah. talking about, we just talked about how Switzerland is beautiful and you can do hiking and all of that. And I feel like maybe what you're experiencing is that sometimes you think, oh, it's so beautiful here. Other places maybe wouldn't be as beautiful, but other times you miss parts of your former life where London had this noise and this energy level, and you miss that, or you miss, like, the way people miss New York. They miss the energy level. Then when they go to New York, they think, oh no, it's too, like, I wish I was somewhere a little bit
Loud.
more rural and more like, or authentic and more closer to nature. And so it's because that we have such a duality within us to, for one to settle down and to just have that one mug, that one, couch, that one piece of furniture that you feel like it's your home and you can put down your roots. On the other hand, you feel like, no, I don't want to settle down. I want to keep moving. And I'm scared to say this is it, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's something I deal with so much. And I feel like everyone has a kind of duality in them, not just when it comes to this topic, but in general. Like, we want commitment with one person, but a part of us is like, oh, but what else is, maybe there's something else out there. That's why nowadays that people find it so hard to commit, because wherever you make that choice, you say no to all the other choices. And that's really scary. And I think this is that, right? It's that fear of making a choice. But unless you make a choice, you're always just going to be free floating and not really settle down. And because you haven't decided, you're always going to be in this anxious state of feeling like you're not fully happy or you're not fully enjoying that moment, because your mind
Mhm.
is constantly spinning and your mind is constantly somewhere else trying to find a solution to the problem.
I think I just want to follow up on what you said, which I think is so important, that that's what I've been realizing, is that, yeah, you remember the best things about the place, and that's why it's hard to choose. And there's this loss aversion, which I guess we call FOMO, and it's inevitable if you choose something. Like, whatever you choose, you're going to miss either the energy of the city or the quiet, the peace. Um, and that's the hardest part. So I guess, like, going down those stages of acceptance and realizing that otherwise you're not moving forward, you're not doing anything, um,
Yeah.
is what's going to push to eventually be somewhere and, really commit to the place. Because I think the most gratifying things come when you are in a place for a long time. And for me personally, um, out of the exciting places where I lived and some of the ones that people consider more boring, I was the happiest when I lived in Abu Dhabi, which is not Dubai. It's not the flashy. Well, it's still kind of flashy and gold. There's there, like, things are there, but it's a lot more, quiet, peaceful lifestyle that people have there. But what's been making me happy there is the community and the feeling that I knew where I was heading. So the sense of belonging, sense of goal orientedness, and everything was building on top of that. And maybe it's not as exciting right away, where it's like New York, Paris, London, it has, theater shows, Broadway, museums, go here, and a lot of those things are free and very bright. um, but eventually it's not what gives you the peace and the sense of feeling, oh, okay, it's my place, it's where I actually want to be.
Yeah, I think about this so much, and it's because I'm also caught up in this feeling of not feeling like I belong and not having a place. Because I think that the issue is not when you're like, oh, I really would love to go and live, let's say, in Germany. Let's say you've always dreamed of living in Germany and you live in China. Okay, then you move to Germany and you really focus on getting that life in Germany because that's what you want, and the good and the bad, because there's going to be bad moments. But the problem is when you don't have that place either, you're just kind of like, I'm not really happy here, but I don't know where. Like, you travel to places and you think, oh, I like it here, but do I see myself here? I'm not sure. Like, where do I actually see myself? This is the conundrum that I experience. This is my life. I don't see myself in Canada. I've lived in Portugal. I liked it there. Do I want to go back? I don't really think so, because so much time has passed. But then I don't know if I want to be somewhere else. And I know for a fact that you can be in the most beautiful place and still feel completely alone and out of place. especially a place that's very transient or that you have no connections to, or that you like, especially if you're working from home and you feel completely disconnected from that society, and then you have to build those connections again. I do strongly believe that there might be a place that you feel more has more of your energy, that like you feel more at home in. I do feel that, and I don't think people should settle down where they don't feel good. Like if they hate the place, if it looks, if visually they're not happy with it, if the energy is off, like you feel it, it's like dating the wrong person. You feel it. And I think
Yeah,
your life is too
definitely.
short to be in a place that you don't enjoy. So what I'm saying is, like, if Switzerland is definitely not the place that you enjoy, that yes. But if it's also like an inner problem of just picking a place, that's a different story, right? Because this is the issue that I find a lot with digital nomads, this constant need to travel and to travel and to travel and to travel. And in a way, like they say that you hit your dopamine, like, because for example, like if you live, let's say, in a country and you go on vacation for 1 week out of the year, you're like, I'm going on vacation for that 1 week. I'm going to enjoy the hell out of that vacation. People
Yeah.
go and they really enjoy themselves. I look at those people and now I'm like, a week on vacation? Like what? That's so little. And it sounds
Yeah.
so spoiled. It sounds first world problem. But it's because I've seen that other life. I have the freedom to go away for a month or for 2 months. And it's all so relative in life. Like if you have that amount of choice and that amount of freedom, anything below that seems to be lesser than. Like you cannot relate to that anymore. So when I go on a week vacation, I don't enjoy it anymore because I've seen the extreme of that, which is spending 6 months in Mexico. So like now 1 week of vacation is like, what kind of a ripoff is that? And I remember I remember being on a plane going to Mexico for 6 months, and I met two people and they're like, they're Canadian. So of course, like vacation time here is minuscule. And they said, yeah, we're going to Mexico for a really long time. And I said, how long? They said 10 days.
Wow.
and I this sounds like I'm making fun of them. I'm not, but it's just that it's a different perspective on life, completely different. And so I think sometimes, I don't want to say less choice is better, but I think maybe you're more satisfied with the little joys that you get out of life versus you and me that have traveled so much, that have seen so much. And now anything lesser than is kind of like a ripoff. You want more out of life, which is a great thing, but it
100%.
can mess up with the happiness that you get, the dopamine hits and everything.
You know how they say ignorance is bliss? I feel like it's the same with traveling. The less you see, the more satisfied you are. But I think it's like that with everything, right? When we go to a store, they say that it's best if there is just a couple of choices because otherwise we're too overwhelmed and it's hard to make any decision. If you've had more partners in your life, I think by the studies there's a certain age, but then yeah, if you go over a certain age and you've had too many partners, then it's harder for you to settle on someone because you cannot accept the downsides, yeah, the negatives that come with the partner or specific habits or something. Yeah, so 100%, like we're so blessed in our lives to have seen all these different places and to experience things. And looking back at myself, 17-year-old, I didn't even imagine I would be living in so many places. It was never even on my mind because I didn't think of it as a possibility. But then thank God for all the opportunities that came my way. Yeah, I've had this experience. And then, yeah, you sort of like switch to a different side of, well, I don't want to call it unhappiness, but, some sort of dissatisfaction, like it's not enough because now you want both the stability and yet with all the amazing things you've seen, how do you settle down somewhere? How do you find your place?
Like I make that comparison with, for example, when you go to a buffet versus when you go to a restaurant, right? What happens when you go to a restaurant and you order one plate of food? Okay, well, it may not be the best plate of food, but you're going to finish it and you're going to focus on it, and you're probably going to enjoy it more than if you were to go to a buffet and you're eating that plate. And I'm definitely a victim of this. Like I'm terrible. I'm a FOMO person because if I get that one plate, I'm thinking about everything else I could be eating, and I just basically like eat it. I leave 30% or 40% of it and I go run to get more food. But I'm not enjoying. And then when you get that full, but you feel like so dissatisfied where you're like, what did I just eat?
Yeah.
It was like gluttony. Like you're just eating everything, but you're not enjoying any of it. And that's kind of how I feel about it's like Netflix. You're like, you like start a movie, you're like, no, it sucks. Next movie. Back when we had Blockbuster, you rent that one tape. You're younger than me, so maybe you don't remember that. But or even like growing up, like in Russia, like I remember we had those few channels and we watched those channels, and that was it. There was no other entertainment, and you enjoy it. People would watch the same movies over and over again. Now you start a movie. 5 minutes in, it's not good. You switch to the next movie. Sometimes you'll spend the entire evening selecting a movie and not actually watching the movie, reading
And
the
then
reviews.
anyways, it's bad because you're not satisfied with any of those. And you know that you could have chosen this one and this one and this one. That's how I was actually speaking to someone who's done PhD in decision making. And I was like, I think I have a problem. Could you help me? And I was like, I want to pick a cafe to work from today. And then I go on Google Maps and I look at the reviews, then I look at the vibe, I look at the rating, I look at all those things, the menu. And then I can't decide where do I go because this place has better food, but this place has, a charger where I can plug. And maybe it has a bathroom so I can leave my laptop and actually, stay there for a longer time. And maybe this one it has better vibe. So it's impossible to choose. And then I remember if I go already, I leave the house, I go to the place, which I was like, yeah, that's the one I chose. I walk in and I'm like, there isn't anybody. Like the vibe is just off. I should go somewhere else. And then you go through 3 places and you can still choose. And I was like, what is the issue? What do I have? He was like, yeah, you have loss aversion. That's the problem. Like, deal with it. He was like, he didn't even say that it's like common or it's normal. He was like, no, you just have loss aversion. Accept it. Deal with it.
Yeah, I don't know if you read the book. I think it's called Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari, and he talks about the same problem where he's like, I want to go get tacos. He lives in the U.S., so tacos are a big thing. So he'll look up like the reviews for the taco place, and then he'll search the top 3, and then which one is that? And then by the time he actually gets to the place that's closed, it's that same idea of like you'll pick the perfect place. This has happened to me a million times, by the way, where I get to the place, I'm like, no. So then I start searching best restaurant next to me. And then I go there and you spend 3 hours just picking the place and then you eat the food quickly and it's done, or you go there and you're not feeling it. And it's not something, unfortunately, a lot of people that are listening to us, they may say like, you girls are so spoiled. I live in Bangladesh. I don't have even the option to go to the next city. And you're talking about first world problems. But I have to say, in response to that, I, s- yes, it is a first world problem for sure, but it's still a problem, if that makes sense. Like to feel dissatisfied with your life is still a problem, even if you live in the most beautiful place in the world, like Switzerland, where, a lot of people would kill to be there. But
Yeah.
if you're not happy to be there, if you're constantly waking up with the agony of thinking, where do I belong? Where do I belong? It can really drain your energy and it can make you feel not fully connected to your life. And then that can really help kill your satisfaction levels. And is it better to have more options or less options? I don't know. I really genuinely don't know what is better. My mom, our parents lived in the Soviet Union, and my mom talks about a time where they had that 1 month vacation where everybody would get together and they would have an amazing month somewhere in Soviet Union, on the sea. And they were all hanging out and there were no phones. And it was a very social time there. Everybody would meet there. They would somehow like get married off of this, like things would
Yeah.
like, they would talk about, they would gossip. So, and then the rest of the time it was just very routine, but because no one had the ability to go anywhere, it wasn't like now everyone's like, I'm going to the Maldives or I'm going here or I'm going there, before the war. But, I think like people just had less comparison with each other. They had no options. They didn't think about the options. If it was cold, if it was winter time, they just dealt with it because there was no other way to be and they enjoyed whatever they could get out of the winter time. Whereas now, when winter comes around, I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I might as well just be somewhere warm,
Yeah.
And then I go somewhere warm and then I'm like, I don't know that I'm super happy to be here either. And then what the hell do I
Because
do?
then
Like,
you're missing out on all the like Christmas fun and snow and stuff. Yeah, that's the problem. But definitely, I mean, there's the right. there's the evolution of problems that people face. At first, it's all the survival problems, then it's extra stuff, and with I think it's from the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, and then there's the second part of that. I don't remember the name of it, but basically there the author says that the more we progress technologically and everything, the more our problems start becoming very like high level, very mental
Philosophical.
problems.
Yeah.
Sorry again?
Philosophical problems. Am I happy?
Philosophical problems, mental health problems. That's why people struggle more and more with mental health, because we are not burdened by thinking of what am I going to eat today and where am I going to, spend the night? Do I have a warm, safe place? So it's good in a way that we have those problems. Although we're not representative of obviously everybody, and in different places people have the problems. When I was growing up, my problems were very different. We didn't travel at all, but it's an indicator of the positive progression for the humanity and for my personal life. I'm happy to have those problems more than I had the problems before, but definitely we still feel them. They are something that we deal with, and it's not something to be disregarded.
Yeah, I'm happy you gave the example of that book, because I love Mark Manson and I follow him, and and it's true. I think like our brain is wired to look for problems. If our basic needs are not taken care of, those are the problems. If they are, we are thinking, "Am I content? Am I happy?" But people that are
Yeah.
going to walk in 2 hours to get water don't have the time or the energy to be like, "But am I really satisfied with my life?" Like, no, you just get the water because you have no water. And now we're like, it sounds like spoiled brats, just being like, but am I genuinely like really, really happy? And then we have the issue of actually being present and in the moment. And there are many reasons for that. But yeah, of course, it's that the prevalence of choice. And actually, I was listening to a TED talk once, and they talked about synthesized happiness. Synthesized happiness is when let's say you get into a car crash and you lose a leg. You're like, I have no leg, but I have no choice. So I'm going to make the best out of living with that one leg. It's what happens in arranged marriages, because it's not like you can divorce the person. Your whole family is involved and his family is involved. So you make the best out of it. But when you can get a divorce, when you are not even married and you're just living with your partner, you can up and leave anytime. So then the I guess the enemy to synthesized happiness is choice, which we all have, because we're 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Unless you make a full-on choice and you say, this is the choice that I'm going to stick with for a year at least. Like maybe your decision to be in Switzerland. I'm going to stick it out for 1 year, even if it's terrible. I'll give it a year. And no matter what happens, I'll be here for a year. You might relate to things differently, and you might look for more beauty in the experience, as opposed to, oh, I'm not sure about this one thing. Okay,
Yeah.
let me go somewhere else. And then that problem presents itself, like it is with relationships and a lot of other things.
I feel like actually, yeah, my goal is to stick it out for 4 years
Oh,
at least, because that's how much time I felt like I needed, or in general, how much time people needed in the UAE to start feeling like it's home. Because in the beginning, everybody would come, like in Abu Dhabi, right? We're starting university, and we are like, oh yeah, it's like a nice place. Thanks for the scholarship, Baba Zayed. But we're probably gonna, bounce by the time we have to graduate and go to more exciting cities, London, New York. And then over time, when you find the community, when you find like subtle things to do that you only find out about from your community, then you really want to stay. And that's how I felt, that I wanted to stay. And I feel like Switzerland, by that acceptance and that mentality, it's very similar. And I feel like I do have to stick it out to start enjoying the place. So the challenge is is there.
yeah. I guess I'll ask you one last question. I mean, how did this whole experience of moving abroad, besides, feeling this prevalence of choice, like how did it change you as a person? Do you feel any change since you moved at 17 to now?
Yeah, the only thing I wouldn't be able to differentiate is what change of that is,
Yeah.
me getting older and becoming more responsible, choosing career and all these things, and what of that is my surrounding. But I think comparing myself to maybe some people back home or like my family, definitely being more open-minded and accepting and knowing that there is no right way to do things. So if I don't understand someone, I would try to think of their backstory, not think, but actually ask, oh, like, what is the backstory? Why are you thinking of this way? Not just say like, oh, it's such a stupid thing to do. Like, are you dumb? That helped me a lot also in understanding myself. Then what I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast was religion. I became agnostic. I'm no longer a very proper Orthodox girl, just because I realized like religions are systems of belief and you can choose what to believe in. It's not one, prescribed way to do things. And that, yeah, things that were done in religion, like the Bible and some of the Quran or some of the rules that come from there, were the rules that needed to be done for the people at the time that they were written. Like pork was hard to store, so that's why you couldn't eat pork. But, I mean, these are just like very superficial examples. But yeah, I think being more open to people, to cultures, to traditions and ways of thinking has opened me up a lot, and that's what shaped me to who I am today.
Let me ask you a fun question. If Switzerland said, "Okay, get out of the country," where would you go tomorrow? But then you would definitely need to settle down there for life. What would you
For
choose?
life? Oh, that's really crazy. I mean, I would have to consider my boyfriend, but which would make this conversation so much harder. I immediately got three places in my head. So I think if it was with my boyfriend, although he hasn't been there, I think he would potentially like the UAE because it's also a very comfortable place, good lifestyle, and I loved it. If I was alone, if I was alone and the war was over, I would probably go back to Ukraine, because then I feel like, yeah, over time, it was one very interesting discovery that I had over time. I think as Eastern Europeans, we're taught all the time that the West is better, then you should go and try to move there and, try to stay there and hold on to it as much as you can for whatever you need to do. And then you realize like the West is not better, it's different, it has its own positives, its own negatives. So maybe with the war being over, I would be in Ukraine, but because of your condition that I would have to like settle and live there for my life. And if not, then the place that I'm still very excited about and where I spent some time as a student, but I would be very happy to come back there, is New York. I just feel like in my 20s, it's one of the great places to be career-wise and socially. I have plenty of friends there, so I would be there.
Yeah,
Maybe.
great answers. All incredibly different and in completely different parts of the world. but I think but you explain it well. Except though, I think in the UAE you would start complaining about the hot summers. My dad lives in Ashman, outside of Dubai, and he's always complaining about the fact that it's like plus 50 in the summer. Like he's like hates it. So as you mentioned, I totally agree with you. Every place has its negatives. Like it you just have to pick the devil that you can live with. They say, like, what is something
Exactly.
you can tolerate? It's the same with a person. Like you mentioned, your boyfriend is more introverted, and I can totally relate to that. And with someone I'm dating, there's a lot of compromise that has to go into that. Like you think you're maybe introverted, but then someone's more introverted than you, and then you think, oh, what, like we somehow have to compromise on this. And again, something that people really struggle these days, because you're so used to just like putting yourself first, and then you think, oh man, now I have to compromise and like what my life is going to look like. Now I have to talk it over with this person, and that's a whole other story. But yeah, thank you for the honest answers. It's it's a tough question, I know, and yeah, it is tough to say like, where do I see myself for my whole life? It sounds like a bit like
Yeah.
prison, but yeah, I think it was really interesting for me to talk to you and to see that obviously I'm not alone. I knew that, but that it's such a common problem these days. So if anyone's listening to us or watching this and they can relate, let us know below, and don't judge us if you don't have the opportunity to travel out of your country. Obviously, we're totally aware that people don't have this opportunity. I think only a small percentage of the world has this opportunity. We're the lucky ones. Being Eastern European, I'm going to knock on wood because I don't want to jinx us. But because we have this opportunity, but it still makes it a problem in a way, and that's why I think it's interesting to talk about having too much choice, because obviously having no choice is an obvious problem as well.
Yeah.
This one is less obvious. But Elza, thank you so much for taking part in the podcast, for talking to me. Where can people go and find you?
My Instagram channel is the very obvious choice. You can find me by writing letitgo.elza with a Z. Yeah, that's where I am, and I try to show up there daily. And thank you so much, Marina, for having me. This was a very interesting and very reflective podcast because, yeah, once again, like talking with someone who had similar experience and where you can resonate with some things, but then you also show me a different lens to look at it. So it's cool. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. I could talk about this for hours. I wish I could, but I can't. And I know we have things to do. So thanks again, Elza. And guys, thank you so much for listening, for watching. Don't forget to check out Elza's Instagram. I'm going to link everything below on wherever you're listening or watching this podcast. Bye, Elza.
Bye.